This is Robbie Dillmore from the Christian Car Guy and Kingdom Pursuit, where we hear how God takes your passion and uses it to build a kingdom. Your chosen Truth Network podcast is starting in just a few seconds. Enjoy it and share it. But most of all, thank you for listening and for choosing the Truth Podcast Network.
This is the Truth Network. Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it no more.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network.
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
Where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
Hey, Nikita Koloff, your host, the one and only. Once, as Stu Epperson will say, once the Russian nightmare, now the devil's worst nightmare. Great to be back with you. Great to be back in studio. Have you ever been tested by God? Does he do that? Does he test us? Have you ever tested God? We're going to talk about that today. I'm going to give you the opportunity to call in and share your story. If you have a story, how God tested you. I have a story. I'm going to share that later. I'm not going to share that right now, but I have a story regarding that, and just want to hear your story. I'm going to give you the opportunity to call in, 866-348-7884. Has God ever tested you, or have you ever tested God? Well, hey, if you've heard me on True Talk Live before, you know I'm like the trivia guy in a way, I guess, in the sense of I love to give 8x10 autographed photos away, and I'd like to do that again today. And I'm going to start with, so here's the very first trivia question, a very simple trivia question, ties right in with testing God. What's the one time he said to test him? Who knows? What's the one time in Scripture, in the Bible, that he said to test him? If you have the answer to that question, 866-348-7884. That's 866-34-TRUTH. And I'm going to give you an autograph, personally autographed, 8x10 photo. We want to give a few of those away today. Testing God. You know, I did a little research. And come to find out, man, there were quite a number of times in the Bible that the Israelites tested the Lord. And I'm just looking through some of my notes. Gosh, some you're probably familiar with, or maybe you're not. Most of the examples are in the book of Exodus after they were exiled from 400 plus years of captivity. And of course, you know, starting with standing there at the Red Sea, right? They got the Red Sea in front of them. They got the Pharaoh pursuing them from behind, and they start questioning. You know, they're fearful of Pharaoh's army, and uncertain of where they're going to go, and yet the Lord parts the Red Sea, as many of you know the story, and just a real show of force and just divine intervention splits that Red Sea. And across they go, right? Blaine from Salem, Virginia, has an answer to the trivia question. I'm going to go to Blaine right now. Blaine, welcome to True Talk Live.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Blaine. Thank you. Thanks for calling in. Salem, Virginia. You got an answer to the trivia question?
Yes, sir. It's in the book of Malachi. He says, test him in the tithing and see if he doesn't open windows of heaven and pour down a blessing that you can't contain at all.
Come on, Blaine. Malachi chapter 3. And he says, in fact, starting in verse 8, he says, should people cheat God? And you have cheated me. And they ask, what do you mean? And when did we ever cheat you? And he said, you cheated me of the tithes and the offerings due to me. And then he goes on to say, you're under a curse, for your whole nation
Yes, sir.
has been cheating me. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there'll be enough food in my temple. And if you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I'll open the windows of heaven for you, pour out a blessing so great you won't have room enough to take it in. That's a pretty good promise, Blaine, right?
Yes, sir. I know that to be true.
You know from personal experience, you have a story, huh? Right? And then he says, try it, put
Yes,
me
sir.
to the test. What's your story?
God's blessed me my whole life. I've always tithed since I went to work, and me and my family have never lacked for anything. He's always taken care of us. I mean, I know a lot of people around my area talk about being laid off. I have never in my life been laid off. Always had a job, always been able to take care of my family. You know, the word says he doesn't always supply your wants, but he will supply your needs.
Come on.
And he has always taken care of me and my family all of these years.
That's
and
amazing.
I'm so very thankful for that.
Yeah, and I'm amazed too at you know, and I've had folks say, you know, I've literally heard folks say, I can't afford to tithe, and Blaine, I'm like, you don't understand the principle because you can't afford not to tithe. Look, he only asked for 10%. Man, he's going to give you 90% to live on. He only asks for 10%, and I have to say for the record, he tested me over the years in this, Blaine, because, you know, I grew up, some know my story, in the projects of Minneapolis in poverty on welfare. And so for the longest time, I, for one, had to overcome that poverty mindset and really learn to trust the Lord. And so I, as well, have been tested there. Blaine, hold on. Don't go anywhere. Want to get your address, and we'll get this 8x10 mailed out to you. I appreciate you calling in to True Talk Live.
Well, you have a blessed day, brother. I enjoyed watching you growing up. I just wanted to let you know that.
Oh, man, thanks for being a fan, man. We love our fans up there in Virginia. So thank you for being a fan. I appreciate it, Blaine.
All right, you have a blessed evening, brother.
Thank you. You as well. When we come back, we're going to go to break here shortly, but when we come back, we're going to talk to Buxman up in Dayton, Ohio. He says he has a story, and we're going to have another trivia question as well, so don't go anywhere. Another trivia question coming up shortly. Hang tight.
Truth Talk Live.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back. Truth Talk Live, your host, Nikita Koloff, former world wrestling champion and host of the Man Up Show and Q&A with Koloff on Truth Radio. Be sure to check those out. We're talking about testing God and being tested by God. And we also had our first winner, Blaine, up in Salem, Virginia, for that personally autographed 8x10. I got another trivia question for you before we continue our discussion on being tested by God or testing God. What kind of tree, here's a pretty easy one for you. Come on now. What kind of tree did Zacchaeus climb in order to see Jesus? What kind of tree? Did he climb an olive tree, a fig tree, a sycamore tree, or a willow tree? 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. I'd like to give away another autographed 8x10. Buxman up in Dayton, Ohio. Thank you for your patience, Buxman. Welcome back to True Talk Live.
Hey, Hey, the Christian that Satan warns people about, Nikita, you're worth the wait, brother. You're worth the wait.
You're so kind. All right, give us a quick story here, Buxman, about being tested by God or testing Him. What do you got?
Well, I honestly, in my years walking with Jesus Christ, Nikita, I've got both, but they would go on and on. So what I will talk about, since all of us are sinners and fall short of the glory of God, I'll talk about how I tested God.
Okay.
And that is basically is where I decided, you know what? I'm in ministry. Now, this is deep, Nikita. I'm in ministry, but hey, I'm covered in grace. So I'll do what I want to do because I know the blood of Jesus covers all of our sin. I'll just 1 John 1:9, I'll just confess my sin, and He is faithful and just to forgive me my sin and cleanse me of all unrighteousness.
Right.
And I'm not kidding you, Brother Nikita. I lost my marriage doing that. And I just want to warn my brothers, especially since I'm male, I'm a man of God. Do not test God like that, brothers. You look at your wife, you love her like Christ loved the church. If you have issues, go get help. Man up and go get help. And that's how I tested God, Nikita.
Man, it's a great story, and it reminds me of what I would call Buxman cheapening grace, like right, like hey, I'll just rely on God's grace and not toe the line or walk the line, and in this case, love my wife the way Christ loved the church, and God will forgive me. I'll treat her the way I want to treat her, and God will forgive me, right? So great advice, Buxman, and I hope somebody out there is listening to Buxman's story. Don't test God that way. It could cost you a marriage or something even more serious, right? Thank you, Buxman.
That is right. Love you guys. God bless you, Nikita.
Appreciate you. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Jim up in Lynchburg, Virginia. Jim, welcome to True Talk Live. You got a story for me or an answer to my trivia question, Jim?
Yes, actually, I have both. So the answer to the trivia question is sycamore tree.
Bam! Come on, Jim. You got it. That's right. He climbed a sycamore tree. Okay, and you got a quick story for me for testing God or being tested by God?
Well, the story is that the testimony is that I lived in North Carolina. Actually, I know Stu. He actually, I think, led to Christ, a gentleman by the name of Mark Sanger, who first discipled me after I came to know Christ in 1999, and I was baptized at their church by Dr. Gary Chapman on Mother's Day. And when I lived in there, I was jobless 4 times in 4 years, and each time the Lord provided for me.
Come on, and He'll do that, right? I mean, that's what He does, as we put our faith and trust in Him, right? And He'll do that for us. And so, the fact that Stu, I'll just apologize, ahead of time. No, I'm kidding. We all love Stu.
He's got a great sense of humor. He's got a fantastic sense of humor.
He does. We all love Stu. Hey, Jim, don't go anywhere. We'll want to get your address, and we'll get that 8x10 autograph sent out to you as well. Okay.
All right. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thanks for calling in, Jim. Lynchburg, Virginia. The Israelites tested God. Buxman up in Ohio said, man, don't test God in this way, gave an example. Here's a couple more examples. I did a little research here. They murmured over the bitter water at Mara, I guess how you say it. I'm no theologian. You'll have to bear with me there. They craved the food of Egypt while they were out in the wilderness of sin. They ignored the Lord's instructions and gathered more manna than they needed. Anyone remember that story? Like they're gathering, like the instructions were, hey, God's going to provide. And there's a whole message in the manna, right? And why God said only gather enough for today, right? And this is kind of miraculous in a way. Think about this. If you're not familiar with this story, gather enough for you and your family today, and only for today, and then tomorrow I'll provide again. And of course, some of them didn't adhere to the instructions, gathered up more than they should have. And then if you know the story, they wake up the next morning and there's like maggots and it's stinking up the whole tent. And you're like, hello, can you not just follow the simple instructions? But here's the miraculous part. Work 6 days, rest 1, right? On the 7th day will be your Sabbath. And so you are not going to work on day 7. So go ahead and gather up twice as much on day 6. Now think about this. Gather up twice as much on day 6, and that's going to sustain you through day 6 and day 7 until we roll around to the brand new week. And as they did that, there were no maggots. There were no maggots. The food didn't stink, right? And so pretty amazing. One other quick example. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about this. Hey, if you have a story, as you've already heard from Jim and Blaine and Buxman, some of the others, 866-348-7888-TRUTH, 866-34-TRUTH. And I want to give away another 8x10 as well. So when we come back, we'll have another trivia question as well. They ignored the Lord's instructions to gather more manna. They attempted to gather more manna. Oh, I already said that on Sabbath and disobeyed God's commandment. Got ahead of myself there. They complained to Moses because of the lack of water at Rephidim, I guess is how you say that. Hey, when we come back, we're talking about testing God or being tested by God. I have a story of my own. Maybe I'll share that with you on the next segment, maybe the last segment. But anyway, don't go away. Truth Talk Live, your host, Nikita Koloff. We got some more great examples coming up, and we will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Truth Talk Live. Boom.
Truth Talk Live.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
All right. We're back. Truth Talk Live. Your host, Nikita Koloff, former world wrestling champion. I'd like to give away another 8x10 autograph photo. Boy, Virginia is on fire today. We've sent 2 autograph photos up to Virginia so far. Here's question number 3, trivia question number 3. Man, I'm just making it easy for you today, like for real, I think. Okay, here it is. The verse that states, ready? The verse that states, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, is found in what chapter of Romans? I'm going to not give you your choices because this one's so easy. I think somebody out there is just going to call in and get it, 866-348-7884. Now, if I do stump you, I'll give you some choices. But 866-34-TRUTH. We're talking about testing God or being tested by God. The Israelites, man, I'm just looking through some of these examples. They committed a grave sin by making a molded calf and worshiped it and sacrificed to it. Talk about testing God. My goodness, right? They complained at Taberah. They complained at Taberah. Now, that's in the book of Numbers. Now, some of these examples are now in the book of Numbers. We moved on from Exodus to the book of Numbers. They complained about not having any meat to eat. How about that? Like, yeah, at least back in Egypt, we had lentils and we had this and we had that. And I'm like, wow, but you were in slavery and now you're free. Here's another one. They didn't trust that the Lord could give them the promised land and conquer its heathen inhabitants. Just a few examples of how the Israelites tested God. How have you tested? We've heard some examples earlier. Some of the guys, some of the folks who've called in, 866-348-7884. That's 866-34-TRUTH. If you have a story, we want to hear your short story of how maybe you tested God, or maybe how God tested you. I have a story. I'm just trying to decide when I want to share it with you. And let me repeat the trivia question. The verse that states, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God," is found in what chapter of Romans? I could give you some examples, or let me just see those who are knowledgeable enough to know which chapter it is. You can narrow it down by just knowing how many chapters are in Romans. That'll narrow it down for you. 866-348-7888-TRUTH. Or if you have a story, okay, maybe you don't have the answer to the trivia question, but you have a story of how God either tested you, and we talked earlier, it was great. We were talking about the one time God said to test him, right? In Malachi, he's like, test me in tithes and offerings. Just go ahead, just give them. And I want just to further comment on that, because, as God pulled me out of a poverty mentality, and I began to learn that principle of giving, one, being a generous giver, and two, being a cheerful giver, right? So giving cheerfully, being generous, and being generous on every occasion. And you've probably heard the expression that you cannot outgive God. And so I would challenge you to test God on that one, because one, he gave us permission. He said, test me on this, sow into my storehouse. And a lot of people debate the whole, Old Testament, New Testament. I'm not up for debate. I'm just going to practice the principle. And I have found from personal testimony that as I give my 10% to my local church, my storehouse, the Refuge down in Kannapolis, North Carolina, and then the Lord's challenged me. You want to talk about testing? The Lord's challenged me to give offerings above and beyond the tithe. So off the top, 10% into the storehouse. And if you are wondering whether you should tithe off of your gross or your net, well, I simply say, what do you want him to bless, your gross or your net? So you figure that part out on your own. That's pretty elementary, I think, right there. And then he's challenged me to give offerings above and beyond the tithe. And so there's a number of ministries as I've prayed into that on where I should, how much, and what I should give to other ministries, both here in America and abroad overseas as well. And so I just want to really challenge you and encourage you at the same time. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. If you have an answer to the trivia question, come on, I want to give one more 8x10 away. Okay, for all have sinned, fallen short of the glory of God. What chapter in Romans? I'll go ahead and help somebody out here. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, or chapter 6? Which chapter of Romans is the verse, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God? And again, I can't emphasize enough that as I feel the Lord has tested me in the area of giving, that as we heard earlier, man, I hadn't missed a meal. I've got clothes on my back. I've got a wonderful vehicle to transport me from point A to point B. the gas tank is full. I mean, feel very fortunate to see the hand of God move in that area of my life. And I got one more story. I guess I'm going to save it for our last segment of another way, a pretty amazing story of how God tested me. Got Mike up in Dayton, Ohio. Mike, welcome to True Talk Live. Are you there, Mike? True Talk Live, are you there, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here now. Yeah, I heard the beep. Yes. How you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful. We got a couple minutes before a break, Mike, but give us a quick story and what do you got?
Well, I was debating back and forth. I'll do the military one. I was getting ready to go into the military, and I had to pass a ASVAB test,
Okay.
And I was struggling with this, and I kept going to God. I go, God, you wanted me to go into this military. I know this is my calling to go there, and you want me to do this. I can't pass the ASVAB test, and I struggled in school, and I froze when I had tests and all this stuff, and I'm getting ready to go in the military, and the guy comes up to me and he says, this is the last test. You got to. This is the last one. If you don't pass this one, you're not going. And I'm in a hotel, getting ready to go to boot camp in the Marine Corps, Paris Island, California. And in the morning, I'm going to take this test. And I'm like, God, I'm in trouble. And I'm in a hotel, and I open up this drawer, and there's the Bible. The Guinean Bible. And I said, the guy goes, how can I prepare for this test? And God said, read that. And I went, okay, I'm reading this, and I read it all night long, and to make a long story short, I passed the test with the highest score when I couldn't pass the test before. And these guys couldn't believe that I did that. And I couldn't believe that I did that. You know what I mean? I'm like, it was God,
Right, right.
And then this is awesome, I'm like, I said, God, if you really want me in the military, I got to pass this test, what I mean? And so, and he said, read the Bible. I said, okay, I'm reading it. I read it all night long. I read that Bible because I wanted to go. I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to start my life, with something.
That's amazing. Well, and Mike, let me just say to you, thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Just great
this is fun.
Great to have guys in put on the uniform. I really appreciate that. And talk about I gotta pass this test. Hello, and read the Bible. What a great
right. And then I aced the test. I mean, I pretty much aced the test. I got the highest score you could get. And then they retested me in the military, because they couldn't believe I couldn't pass it before. So they retested me 3 or 4 times, and I aced it every time. Every time I was acing it. And I could get, they just couldn't believe that I was flunking it before and I was acing it now.
They're like, this guy cheated. How did he do this?
Right, exactly.
But God.
It was all God. It was all God bringing it all to my remembrance and all to my skill level.
All right. God. Don't go away. Thanks, Mike. Don't go away. One more segment. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Truth Talk Live.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back. Truth Talk Live, our final segment here today. Your host, Nikita Koloff, former World Championship wrestler. Shout out to Mike up in Dayton, Ohio. What a great story. Sitting in a hotel room. And shout out to the Gideons. Hey, Gideons, thank you for I'm sure Mike is grateful. You put that Bible in that drawer there in his hotel. And he finds the Gideon Bible. God says, read the Bible. And he's obedient. He reads it and aces the test not once but several times. Hey, I want to give away one more 8x10. Come on now, call on in. The verse that states, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And, last time I looked up that word all in the Greek, the definition, you know what I found? It said it meant all. My attempt at humor there. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Found in what chapter of Romans? Chapter 1, 2, 3, or 6? 866-348-7884. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Come on, I want to give away that 8x10. I said I've been teasing you all along here that I had a story where another way God tested me. Interesting story. We're going back quite a few years ago, and the Lord, I was sitting in a prayer room on New Year's Eve, and the Lord clearly said, grow your hair out starting tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. And maybe some of you aren't familiar, with my wrestling character, but I had and have a shaved head and had a Fu Manchu mustache, and it was like shave off your facial hair, grow out your hair, and I'm like, okay. And I want to walk in obedience, right? And then he specifically said, and I'll tell you when you can cut it. I'm like, okay. Seems like easy enough instructions, right? Grow out your hair and shave off your facial hair. I'll tell you when you can cut it. And so I did. So I started doing that. And as one might guess, initially I looked like one of the chia pets, one of those plants when it first started growing, because I can't cut it, right? So I can't trim it, can't cut it. And as it continued to grow, people will come to me and they're like, hey, like, what are you, like doing some like Nazarite vow or something? What are you doing? You grow, your hair's starting to kind of get long. And I'm like, no, it's to my knowledge, it's not really a Nazarite vow. No, it's just God said, grow out your hair. And they're like, well, do you know why? And I'm like, he hadn't told me that part yet. He has not told me why yet. And so condense the story, fast forward the story. I'm growing out my hair, growing, and I get like a legit mullet, right? If you can envision, it just keeps growing. 16 months. I grow my hair, no trimming, no cutting, no facial hair. And finally, he releases me, and my two youngest daughters, Colby and Kendra, got the privilege of getting out the clippers once he set me free, so to speak, and got to shaving because they didn't like it. They're used to dad with the bald head, the shaved head, and so all that to say, then others came to me and said, "Well, do you know why he asked you to do that?" And then I had an answer. I said, "Yeah, actually I do," and what God was testing me was as you might, if you can envision. So I had a certain look in the wrestling ring and in those wrestling days, and what the Lord revealed to me is he was testing me to see if I'd be okay if people didn't recognize you. Now, we were out recently. I was out with Robbie Dillmore and his wife at a restaurant recently, and it was actually kind of crazy over the top how many people, including the restaurant owners and the waitress's husband and several patrons, kept coming over to the table and wanting pictures and all that sort of thing, which doesn't happen all the time at this point. But all that to say, the Lord wanted to know if I would be comfortable in my own skin without being recognized as the Russian nightmare, Nikita Koloff. Would I be okay with that? Or was my identity so wrapped up in my wrestling character that I'd have a problem with it? And for the record, not nearly as many people recognized me. Some still did, but not nearly as many. And I like to think I passed the test because 16 months, it's a long time, right? And when he finally released me and said, okay, if you want, you can shave it off. And so my daughters did. And yeah, it was really a great test for me to know that, and here's the lesson, my identity was not in the pro wrestler Nikita Koloff. My identity is in Christ. And the wrestling that I did was simply a part of my story. It's what I did. It's not who I am. Royce up in Dayton, Ohio. Royce, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Royce, it sounds like you have an answer to my trivia question. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, what do you got for me, Roy? What's the answer to the trivia question?
I believe it's in Romans 3.
Romans chapter 3, verse 23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's exactly right, Royce. You are winner number 3. And hey, Royce, real quick, do you have any short story for how the Lord has tested you? And if not, it's okay. If not, it's okay. I put you on the spot, Royce. No worries. Hey, listen. Hang tight. We're going to get your address and get this 8x10 mailed out to you, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, thanks, Royce. All right, Royce up in Dayton, Ohio, talking about being put on the spot, right? You're like, he'll probably think of 10 different ways that he's went past some of the tests. Life itself is a test, right? I mean, if you think about it, if I want to look at some of my notes here, I wrote down life is a test, right? Life is a test. And one of the things I believe is the word responsibility plays in there, right? Life is a test in how we handle responsibility, right? And sometimes, even through whether it's growing out my hair or setting me free of a poverty mentality and becoming a cheerful giver and a generous giver on every occasion, what I have found is in the times the Lord has tested me, I would summarize or conclude that it's been a building of my character and a testing of my faith. A building of my character and a testing of my faith. Life is a test. And I'm just reminded of how we handle responsibility, right? Life is a test. We spend only a fraction of our lives on this side of eternity. God doesn't care, I don't believe, about our achievements while here on earth, but he does care about our character, and he will test us and test our character, right? And to build our character, he'll put tests in front of us to build and develop our character. And if I would say this, we've been put on this earth for I think 2 primary reasons, and you might relate to this. One, to know him personally. So you were put on this earth to know him personally. And then secondly, to develop your character. What are you going to take with you to heaven? For those of you who've surrendered your heart to Christ, those of you who accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior, and your name's been entered into the book of life, that there will come a day, you can't take any of the material things with you as much as some try to store up, build bigger storehouses and store up more treasure here on earth that moth and rust destroy. I just want you to know, you won't be, there's no U-Haul attached to a hearse. You won't be bringing any of that materialistic things with you, but you will be bringing your character with you. So whatever you develop there, we've seen a steep decrease in responsibility in our culture, if you're paying attention. I mean, many in our world live by the motto, I'm not responsible for anything. It's not my fault, which really is in stark contrast to the Bible. Responsible people make the most of the life God has given them. And so whatever tests you've gone through, I hope today and being a part of True Talk Live, something been stirred inside of you, maybe to think back on how you've been tested and how coming through that test, It's been a developing of your faith and a building of your character. And I don't know if you're like me. When God presents me with a test, like he presented Mike with a test, hey, he wants to join the military. He's got to pass that test. Here's your last opportunity, or it ain't happening, right? There have been certain tests in my life, and we're just about out of time, and I could tell you some stories where I was like, Lord, I want to pass this test the first time out. I don't want to have to repeat this test. Remember back in your school days where you had to where you could do a retake or a repeat, and maybe retake the test. I don't want to retake any test. Hey, tune in to the Man Up Show podcast and Q&A with Koloff. Check it out. Glad you're here today. Signing out.
Another program powered by the Truth Network.